Hi, welcome to our webinar, When School Isn't in School, The Successful Online Learner, which is brought to you today by the Center of Excellence for College and Career Readiness at Francis Marion University. My name is Meredith Love, and I will be talking through this webinar with you today. As I said in the intro, this webinar came out of discussions that we had with K-12 teachers who were just talking about different struggles that they saw their students having as online learners. And it prompted us to think about some of these questions. So just questions to kind of guide our thinking today. What happens when school is not in school? What happens when you don't share classroom space with your students and they don't share classroom space with other students? How can you connect with your students? And how do you know that you are connecting? And then these two questions are where we're going to focus today, which is how can you prepare students to learn online and what do they need to know in order to be successful? So I'll give you just a second to think about those last two questions in particular, because that is what this webinar is going to focus on today. Okay, so when students aren't in school, a lot of things happen, right? I think that those of us who taught online earlier in the year, or maybe even this summer, can see that students go into sort of home mode. And for some of those, that means that they get up out of their seat and they walk around. For some of them, it means that they're kind of talking to other people in the room or other people in the house while they're trying to learn. It can mean lots of different things. We know that students don't always follow dress codes. Some of us saw that having Zoom meetings with our students. When they don't, in other ways, sort of perform as a student. They perform as they would, hanging out at home, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, we know that our environment oftentimes shapes our behavior. So that is certainly one of the challenges of learning online is how do I act the student when I haven't put on my student clothes, when I haven't picked up my book bag, when I'm not wearing my lanyard, when I'm not doing all of the things I usually do when I am a student. Also, I think that for a lot of students, doing the online learning meant, that it wasn't real school, that it didn't in some ways count. I think that maybe starting in the fall, that's going to be a little different because we're not sort of going to online learning, but we're beginning in that place. But focusing on the fact that, yes, this is real school and you need to act as you would in school is an important thing as well. And some teachers reported that students just kind of forget what they know about organization, about paying attention, about note taking when they're not in that classroom environment. So again, what can we do to help students be successful and maybe overcome some of these mindsets? Okay, so from the research that we've done and from looking around at different articles online, there have been some research studies done about what makes a good online learner, or what are some of the habits or behaviors of successful online learners. A lot of times these studies focus on adult learners, and there have been some with children, but it's not particularly widespread. But from what I could find, and from in particular this site from Minnesota, we pulled out these features of a successful online learner. So a successful online learner is persistent. They can manage their time. They have strong communication skills. They have strong technical skills. They're not afraid to, go from platform to platform. They have good reading and writing skills. They're motivated and independent, and they have a good, healthy study environment, which, as we talked about, is not something that a lot of our students have or have much control over. Technical skills, it's kind of the same thing as well. So let's start with persistence. So these are the ones that we're going to focus on today. We're going to look at persistence, time management, communication skills, and reading and writing skills. So persistence. As I started to put this together, I struggled a little bit myself trying to come up with, how do we talk to students about persistence. And, it occurred to me that saying like, be persistent, just be persistent is probably not the most helpful approach. That we really do need to work on breaking this down for our students. So I broke up this part of the webinar into 3 sections: discussion, reflection, and activities that are related to persistence. So let's just jump right in here to talk about persistence. I want to go ahead and start with this escalator video. Give me one moment.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something?
Help! Help! Help!
I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's not enough left to do, is there?
Hello? Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
He said he could fix it. All right. All right. That's more like it. He says he can fix it.
Walking down the sidewalk, kicking my feet as I'm moving to the music. Step to the beat, I woke up today.
Okay. Okay, so one of the things you could do with your students is to show the escalator video. This is something that we show a lot with teachers, and oftentimes teachers will talk about how they see their students stuck and how this video sort of illustrates the ways in which students sometimes get stuck. And it is something that you could use with your students. You could have them watch this really short, accessible video and, have a discussion about what happened here. Like what exactly, tell me the story of what happened here. Talk about what would they have done in the different positions of those 3 people. You can ask them if they think it's funny or why is it funny. Oftentimes when we show this, people aren't sure whether they should laugh or not. So they might think it's funny, they might not. What does this video have to do with school or their future or their lives? And then asking them, have you ever felt stuck like this? I think that this short video and asking these questions, either, have them do some writing or some discussing of these questions before coming together, is a great way to begin a conversation about persistence, about what it means to get stuck and not stay stuck, or what it means to get stuck and to be able to ascertain what the next move is. So that's one way that you can begin to talk with your students about persistence. Another comes from a researcher named Angela Duckworth, who most of you have probably heard of, and this is from her website. I will note that all of these resources are going to be available online on our website, and I'll give you that information here at the end. So don't worry about trying to take notes on these. What Duckworth says on her webpage for her book, Grit. My research focuses on 2 traits that predict achievement: grit and self-control. Grit is the tendency to sustain interest in and effort toward very long-term goals. Self-control is the voluntary regulation of impulses in the presence of momentarily gratifying temptations. On average, individuals who are gritty are more self-controlled, but the correlation between these 2 traits is not perfect. And she goes on to explain that a little bit more on her webpage, but even more extensively in her book, Grit. which is an interesting book if you haven't picked it up. And I think that when we look at her definition, this tendency to sustain interest in and effort toward long-term goals, if we even think about finishing a online course or finishing a semester online as a long-term goal, that might seem short-term to us. For students, that could seem pretty long-term. But we can see how important persistence is, because it is easy to lose interest in and to not put effort towards a course when you're not in a room with people, when you're not feeling the good vibes that you get sometimes from school, when you're not getting that encouragement, when you are not maybe as engaged as you might be. So persistence is something that Duckworth focuses on, and she has what's called the grit scale. And I'll go ahead and link us to that really quickly again on our website. This is featured as one of the resources. You can see here, this is Angela Duckworth's site, and a grit scale. She has this version. She says there's no right or wrong answers, just answer honestly. And then you can answer these questions and put in your score. She also has an 8-question version of it as a PDF in her grit scale. I think it's over here in research. Yep, an 8-item grit scale here, and that students can take. And what it does is it gives them an idea of, I'll show you here towards the end. Are you extremely gritty or not at all gritty? So this notion about persistence, about, how likely are you to give up? How likely are you to stick with things? So I present this grit scale to you not as sort of a perfect psychological instrument, but as something that you can do with your students to begin or get into, again, a conversation where they're reflecting on their own behaviors and thinking about what this means in terms of their online learning. Other things you can do to emphasize the importance of persistence in your courses is to play games that encourage problem solving. These 2 links down here have a couple of different things. Give students discussion questions or scenarios that don't have one answer, but that might have multiple solutions to it. Provide opportunities for productive struggle, model that struggle, show students that doing particular tasks is not going to be easy, that it is probably not something that they're going to be able to do the first time. I'm trained as a writing teacher, and so in my writing classes, what I'll often do is pull up a blank screen, and we will work together to write an introduction to the paper I've assigned. And I will write it. I will sit there and I will type. I will make mistakes. I will go back. We'll revise it. And I just model for them that writing is a difficult task, that writing is not something that you just sit down and do right the first time, but that it takes some persistence and some grit. The other thing you can do is to create low stakes assignments that do give students the opportunity to struggle. Have them work on something that requires a lot of problem solving, but don't make it count a lot. So take some of the pressure off of them. But just engaging again and again in problem solving exercises, in struggling, and you being there to support that struggle, I think is one way that we can help encourage persistence. A lot of this research comes out of math teachers talking about the importance of productive struggle and helping students understand that things, you might not get that problem right within the first couple of minutes. The resources that I have down here, the first one is actually sort of from like a corporate training site. So a lot of these things, come out of team building exercises that people might do in the corporate world. And then the other one comes out of icebreakers. Sometimes icebreaker activities and those kind of group activities are all about problem solving too. And these can be sometimes, maybe a little hokey, but fun ways to have that discussion about persistence and what it in those reflective moments where students can think about, am I persistent? What do I need to do differently? Okay, time management. This is a big one. When I teach our university life class at FMU, one of the things I make all of my students do, and they hate it, is buy a planner, right? We stock some very inexpensive planners, like $5 planners at the bookstore. I have them get these calendars. They sit down with their syllabi. They write in all of their due dates. They write down when tests are going to happen. They write down when there are holidays, when they don't have to be at school. And at the end of every course where I've had them do that, they say, oh my gosh, Dr. Love is amazing. She helped me manage my time by having me write things in my planner. And it's always so funny to me because I've just always been that kind of person. And I think a lot of us are. And it's important to remember that a lot of students have never, really practiced much in terms of time management, and we need to teach them how to do it. So, as having students get planners, having, all kinds of different kind of time organizers, using one that is online through Google or whatever it needs to be, can be a really good thing and does become increasingly important when students are doing online work. Making sure that you provide your students with a daily schedule of what you're covering in class, of course, and what's going to be due, but encouraging them to do a daily schedule as well. I wake up at this time, I'm going to try to do this subject this time, and I'm going to work on this one. And I know that this one, that the way that this teacher has constructed their online work, I'm going to be, needing to pay really close attention. So I'll do that first in the morning, whatever they need to do to manage their time so that they can be most successful. But it's going to take some time to think it through, and you may need to help them work through that a little bit more, whether they are college students or whether they are high school students. The other thing you can do is offer your students a sample schedule of what their day might look like, just so that they can see it. Or if you have a student who did a good job with this when they were learning online, ask them to borrow that, take their name off of that, give them some models of what this might look like. Okay, so this is a planning document that comes from NASA and a couple of other groups who have partnered together for what's called expeditionary learning. And expeditionary learning is somewhat similar in some ways to project-based learning or to any kind of approach to learning that is going to focus not only on the content in school, but also with a very large emphasis on what students should be learning in order to be ready for careers, for the workforce, and for college. So this document, again, is on our website, but you can see here that it has some, chances for students to break down how much time that they did spent doing different things, minutes with my family, minutes on activities, minutes on my phone or TV, video games, and then some things asking them to reflect on their behaviors. And again, this kind of thing might be better for your older students who, have the ability to kind of sit and to think about some of these questions a little bit more, and who might be more willing to talk about how they use their time. This would be great done in smaller groups if people are face-to-face, or having a discussion board, about what people learned after they did this worksheet might be a good way to have a conversation again about how to best manage time, which, as we pointed out, can definitely be challenging in an online environment. Okay, so the next piece of this is another self-assessment, this one from Western University, asking, are you a good time manager? Respond to the following inventory. Yes, no, yes, no. This is a more simple tool that you could use maybe with some of your younger students to have a conversation about time management, to have discussions about using small blocks of time, prioritizing the dangers of procrastination and stuff like that. So The next thing I want to talk about is a subject near and dear to my heart, which is professional communication. And I wrote here professional/school communication because I do think that middle and high school, and certainly when students are college, is a really good time to think about what my digital communication skills look like. How do I come across to other people in digital environments? And then, of course, if you're doing school completely online, it's everything. It's how you get answers to questions. It's how you work with others if you're doing any kind of group project that you're supposed to be working on virtually. So the ability to communicate clearly and professionally is so important in an online environment. And so the first question is, how does this differ in an online environment? And just like I said, I just think that the stakes are higher when that is your primary form of communication. So here are some things you could talk to your students about regarding cameras. I would tell students to imagine that they are in class. If at all possible, be in a location where they can sit in a chair with a desk, with a table, looking at their computer. Laying down in bed is not, necessarily the best idea, but trying to mimic, a posture and a situation that is close to school, I think might be helpful. Encourage students to dress like they would for school, to position the camera at eye level so that they're looking directly into it, to double check the background to make sure that the things that they have on their wall are appropriate, and to also be sure to focus on the speaker. Now again, these are not things that students can always control, but to the extent that they can, I think that these are some good tips to give them about when they have Zoom meetings, or maybe even there could be some things that are higher stakes, like perhaps they have a job interview that is going to be an interview for an internship, or maybe even a college interview that's now being done online. So these tips, and the more that we can do to help students be professionals in these on-camera situations, I think is just going to help them in the long run. And then there is, of course, professionalism when it comes to writing email and messaging. So some basics that I teach when I teach writing emails, both in University Live classes and then in business writing, we actually spend a good bit of time talking about writing effective emails. These are some things that I talk with my students about, including a relevant subject line, making sure there's a greeting, dear so-and-so, and a closing. Thanks. Best wishes. Sincerely. A lot of times students think that email is really a vastly different type of communication than a letter or something more formal. And I think that we can have good discussions about the ways that it's like a letter and the ways that it's not like a letter. But the fact of the matter is there should be a clear subject line that represents what this message is about, and you should address your reader, and you should make sure that you have signed your name or given your name at the end of that message. It's always good too to identify yourself in an email message when you're writing either to someone you don't know or to someone who you might not communicate with all the time. So I always suggest to my students when they email professors, for example, that they say, "Hi, this is Charles from your business writing class. That meets Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8:30. Or, "Hi, this is Sarah from your English 2 class." Just so that that reader can put a face with a name and can really focus on who you are, what your message is, and what you need. Use complete sentences. Students want, of course, to write emails the way that they text. That is just what they've, come up doing. It seems natural to them that the one should be like the other, but we need to teach them that email is a form of communication that's going to be slightly more formal, and that certainly in the workplace and in the school setting needs to have complete sentences, needs to be thought out, even proofread or spell checked. Lots of people don't think that that's a necessary step with email, but I think that we can teach our students that it certainly is. And then ask them to leave out emojis. That we're not going to rely on emojis to convey mood or tone, but that we do have to use our words in order to convey those messages. So a couple of different things you can do. I always like giving my students bad examples of emails. This is from Henry County Schools. Again, it's linked on our website, and it just has some different ones. This is Tiffany Johnson. This is from Ava writing to Tiffany, and it's about what Bratney is wearing, and so it's like talking about people and speaking meanly about people, which is never a good thing to do, well, period, but also within electronic communication, because we need to remember that those messages can be easily forwarded on to other people, and it's just not good form. And then down here is a more appropriate email, and we can talk about, why does this one seem more professional? What is more effective about a message like this? This is a scenario, and you're welcome to use this. I set this one up for my students. I say you're a Bisley English professor who receives 75 messages a day. This is from a student who forgot his assignment and asked if he could email it to you on Monday, but you received this message on Tuesday. And so these are 3 different possible messages that that Sam has sent you, and you can have one group look at one group look at the other look at the third one. You can have students read through these and decide which one is the most effective piece of communication, and the most effective one would be the one where the English professor writes back to them and says, okay, great, I received your assignment, everything is going to be okay. We want a positive response from the English professor. And then you can have them discuss, well, what's ineffective about the other two. So giving them examples where they can look and start taking apart, what does a good email look like? What is an effective professional piece of communication? And what is not, is something that you could do. And so again, these are just some exercises that I do with my students. This one is from a school district in Alaska, and it's just a really simple exercise that you can use. It's for younger students, and the question is, how is writing an email similar to or different from writing a letter? And it says students explore the components of well-written email. That they say that it has a 5-part structure that's similar to traditional letters, and then they have them analyzing an email, making notice of the differences. So this is something that they use in their elementary schools, but I'm sure that this is something that we could take and ramp it up for middle and high school, and maybe even college. So take a look at those as well. In addition to these resources, there are Okay, so if we go back to our earlier slide about the features of a successful online learner, persistence, we talked about the importance of making it clear to students that they might have to work harder, that there might be some things that are frustrating, that they need to stick to online learning, to get questions answered, and to really think carefully for themselves about whether they're giving up too quickly, or what that means for them in terms of online, whether they tend to give up more quickly in an online setting maybe than in face-to-face, and how they can stick to that, and what you might be able to do as an instructor to help them get through the course. And then time management, something that we all struggle with, that we see our students struggle with, is again something that's going to be amplified in an online learning environment, potentially. So the exercises where students do a lot of self-reflection and think about where their time goes, teaching them that that they can in some ways harness their time a little bit more by planning, by not procrastinating, and by forecasting and looking ahead to what it is they need to get done. And then communication skills and reading and writing skills, I sort of collapsed when we talked about writing emails and the importance of treating the communication that you have with your teacher as professional communication. This is also very important, because if you can imagine a student who might be a junior or a senior in high school or college, they are probably at the cusp of needing some recommendation letters for their next steps, whether that be a job or whether that be graduate school or college. And teachers need to be able to speak to their professionalism. And so helping students understand what it means to be a professional in their online communications can really help them as they move down the line and as they begin to ask other people to talk about their professionalism as well. We didn't talk about reading skills. I almost feel like there could be an entire webinar just devoted. I know that there could be an entire webinar devoted to reading skills. But a few things that you might want to let your students know about reading online is that when we read online, we have a tendency to skim. It's how we look at our phones. It's just how our brain sort of seems to interact with a screen. And so pointing out to students that skimming is probably not their best approach, even though it's what their eyes might want to do. It's just something worth noting with them. If there are annotation tools available in whatever programs you're using to plan your online learning, please let students know about those. Let them know about the ways that they can highlight or add comments or questions to text and save them so that they can access those later. Encourage students to read with paper next to them, to take notes as they read, to write down the major headings of a chapter or an article so that they can maybe recall that information a little better and such. But it could definitely be a challenge to read online, and becoming aware of the way that you read online can, I think, sometimes help you become a better reader. We'll also make sure that there are some resources on our website about reading online as well. So I hope that this has been a useful webinar and that it gives you lots of good things to talk with your students about. If you do decide that you want to access some of these resources, I will walk you through that right here on our webpage. There are some, this is under Educators and Administrators, Student Success Online, so it's right at the top. There are some more general sort of resources here, and then writing emails, time management, and we'll put the persistence activities up there as well. So I hope that you will find those useful. Other things that we have on our website are other resources for you all about helping students transition from middle to high school, from high school to college. Also, we have some resources for students and parents about college and career readiness. And this is a fairly new resource that our administrative assistant Judy Norris put together for us. And this will link you to virtual tours of colleges and universities in South Carolina. So we hope that this has been a useful webinar for you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at mlove@fmarion.edu. And thanks again for your support of the center.